Well, good day and welcome to the Mitchell Sentinel podcast. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. And we're going to talk about all sorts of stuff. Poet laureate of Mitchell, Ned Norton, and about fencing, since how that's what we did up at the family property. Anyways, Dad, you want to get started?
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit today about Ned Norton. Ned and Zella, they were the upper echelon of this community for quite a few years, and Ned was a well-read man. He could quote Shakespeare, the Bible, anything in the history, and he was kind of a mentor for me. I kind of looked up to Ned and admired what he did. He told me a story. He grew up down around Monroe, which is on the western side of the mountains. And he said one day he was kind of loitering around the schoolhouse, and after they had asked him to leave, and he didn't want to go home and face the music, so he just kind of hung around the schoolhouse waiting for quitting time so he'd go home and maybe snow his parents into believing that he hadn't got kicked out of school. So while he was waiting there, he actually crawled underneath the schoolhouse, and pretty soon this little girl exited the schoolhouse, and she was headed towards the outhouse. This was back in the days when they had the outhouse out there, one or two holer, probably a one holer. Anyhow, she was heading in kind of a hurry, and she got almost halfway, and she realized she wasn't going to make it.
She couldn't make it, huh?
She could not get there. So she kind of backed up against the schoolhouse and pulled her pants down and let it fly. And old Ned, he was underneath the schoolhouse, and for some reason he said, I took this board and I slid it under where she was making her deposit. And he said, when she had finished, he said, I pulled that board back in underneath the school, and said she got done and she looked back and there was nothing there. She pulled her pants down again and seen if there was in there, and she just couldn't find it. And he said, man, that'd give him a pretty good chuckle that day.
Well, so, okay, let me try and get it all figured out in my head. So she kind of backed up to the wall.
Yeah.
And the school didn't have any skirting between the building and the ground.
No.
And Ned was hiding out under there trying to avoid school.
Right, yeah.
Okay, and he slid the board under.
Well,
that would kind of cause someone a shock. It's like, well, I knew something happened
something
here.
Something came out, but I don't know where it went. Yeah, pretty funny. Pretty funny. Anyhow, it's pretty. But Ned, we'd already covered Ned working at Hovey and Elbert McCarty when they would frequent the House of Ill Repute. Not Elbert, but the other two. So we won't cover that again today.
Okay.
Now, Ned retired from working. He'd done a lot of things, but he finally retired from the ODOT. And he figured that he had a little more time and everything to use. And so he said, you know what I think? I said, I think I'm going to buy me a boat. A motorboat, he said.
Well, where would you run a motorboat around here?
Well, he would go over to the Ochoco or Prineville Reservoir or something like that. Anyhow, Zella being married to him for so long, she knew that he probably wasn't going to get all that much use out of the boat. But then it kind of twitched and morphed into a kind of a spite thing. And so Ned, he bought the boat, and he parked it right in front of the kitchen window at his house. So every morning when Zella was looking out the window, washing the dishes and everything, he would look out and see that boat, and I think he was probably getting to her a little bit. And she kept pressuring him to use the boat, and finally he said, you know, I really don't trust that motor on that boat. He said, it's pretty old. He said, you know, I think I'd use that boat more if I bought a new motor. So he goes over to town. He buys him a motor, probably $700-800, puts it on the boat, and the boat sits there. And every time, like I said, Sally would look out that window, and she'd look out the window and not only see the boat, now she's seeing the boat with a new motor that wasn't getting used. So I call this boat the SS Spite boat.
Well, they say there's only 2 days that are really happy in a boat owner's life. Is when you buy it and when you sell it.
I think so. Well, anyhow,
maybe even when you sink it.
When Tom got a little older, I think he hooked onto it.
Tom
Norton should be his grandson.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I think they used it a little bit, but for the amount of money Ned invested, the use he got out of the boat wasn't as much as what he got out of aggravating his wife. And so she was a member of the Assembly of God Church, and she pressured Ned into. She said, "You need to go to church with me." She said, "We're going to have this lady evangelist in. She's going to give her testimony and everything, and you need to really go to church with us." To do the backstory on this, you have to understand that Ned Norton was a Marine in World War I. He served his country. So not only did he serve, two of his sons served in World War II, and his daughter served in World War II. He lost one son on Iwo Jima. And so anyhow,
what was his son's name?
Carlisle. Mm-hmm. And then there was Walter. Walter's the one that got killed on Iwo Jima. Cork was in a boat right off of Iwo Jima waiting to go to the next island, I think. I don't think he got to see any action at Iwo Jima. Maybe he did. I don't know, but I don't think so. Anyhow, Walter didn't make it off. And Virginia, she served in the Nurses Corps, so they did their part for sure. Okay, now we're back to going to church and hearing this lady evangelist. So Ned was not, he probably knew the Bible as well as anybody that ever preached it, but he was not what you call a churchgoer. So she just kept pressuring. Finally, he I guess he walked by the spike boat and felt a little guilty, and he thought, well, okay, I'll maybe make up a little time that I lost and a little effort here, and so I'll go to church. So he gets down there, and they're sitting in the very front row, and this lady goes into her thing, and she was doing her testimony, and she got to the point where she how low down she had really gotten. She was drinking, carousing, and everything. And, she got to that point where she said, how low I really got? I got so low down, I even dated a Marine. Oh, man. The old Ned, he cannot keep himself composed, man. He just come unwound there and tickled the heck out of him. And the old Sella got pretty red.
I bet.
Yeah.
Well, I never met Ned, but I remember Sella. And she was part of the Ladies Legion.
Oh yeah.
And and she was part of the Lions Club, right? And
I think I'm not sure about the Lions Club, but I know she was really big in the Ladies Auxiliary for the Legion.
And a heck of a sewer.
Yeah, and then she also she was a postmaster here for many, many years, and she would go to these postal conventions and meetings all over the state and the nation, and whenever they have a national one, and it kind of helped old Ned out a little bit because Ned liked to partake of the drink, a little bit.
So when she was out of town, he'd
usually have a party or two and have a snort, and he could go down to the pastime then. And he could just sit there and talk to people, and they just keep buying him drinks. So we were just, our station, my dad and I's station is just up from the pastime. So we'd see his old pickup sitting down there because it wasn't down there all that frequently, only when there was a convention.
So that'd be a good high time to go hang out with Ned.
Yeah. So they would they'd do that. So this one particular time I remember I'd see him come out, and he stopped, and I said, "Hey, Ned, do you want me to drive you home? You may not be very good to get there." "Oh, don't worry about me, Daniel," he said. "I'll get there." Well, he calls me up about 15, 20 minutes later and said, "Well, Daniel, I should have let you drive me up here." He said, "I just took out Mrs. Moore's picket fence." Mrs. Moore lived right below him there a little bit, and Ned got over a little bit too far to the right. And
so will that be where Bill Chandler's place was?
Yeah, right, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was Mrs. Moore's place. Anyhow, he took out her fence, but, rest assured that fence was replaced before Zella got home.
I bet it was.
Yeah. And then another time, he came up and he was pretty inebriated. So I went down, got his pickup, and I drove it up, and we drove it inside the station where it was kind of out of sight. And he was sitting there in a chair, and he's a big man. He's hard to move, and he was limber like that. And so we got him up, put him in the passenger side of his pickup and everything, and I drove him home. Well, Dad, he followed me up to pick me up after we got up there. So they live at a house that's got some steps getting into it. We had a heck of a time. He weighed well over 200 pounds at this time. And we got him inside, and they had these throw rugs there and everything, and we were trying to get him into bed, and we couldn't get him into the bedroom, and we got him partially on the couch, and he was so limber, and he was just about to go to sleep, and his feet were on the rug, and we could not lift him and get him on the rug that way. So we just kind of rolled him up and put him to sleep on the bed. So that was another time we saved his integrity a little bit. Yeah.
Boosted him up a bit.
Yeah.
Well, those postal conventions would probably be about a week long.
Yeah. They enough to give him a chance to maybe go 2 or 3 parties or cause them. Ned was also I said he was a real well-read guy, and but he's also a pretty gifted painter. In fact, his homestead was down on the other side of the Painted Hills, and all the little kids around here thought Mr. Norton was he painted those hills himself. But he did paint the hills. He painted 2 or 3 portraits of them, and I got the paintings. I guess they weren't portraits. I guess. I don't know. It's technicality. Portraits of the Painted Hills.
Well, I think he took like artistic liberties with them, but it looks good.
I mean, yeah.
It wasn't like he sat there and did an exact carbon copy of the hills.
Oh, no. These were all painted from his mind.
Yeah, and so I really kind of enjoyed how imaginative he was with that.
Yeah, he did really well with that. I've got one hanging in my store downtown, and then I got one in my basement here. That they were actually hanging in the Norton store.
Norton's General Store,
yeah,
which is the Wheeler County Trading Post now.
And then when they closed the Norton store and went to Wheeler County, Vonda gave the paintings to me. But about 10 years later, Dale Cole was Jim Cannon's son-in-law.
And Jim Cannon's your uncle.
Yeah, and Jim Cannon's my uncle. And he had these... he sold his house, and the guy that bought the house found in a cranny crammed back in there something, a painting. And this painting was what you call a parsnip. He said, now, why would anybody want to paint a picture of a parsnip? I said, I know the story. He said, Jim Cannon raised this parsnip. It weighed 4 3/4 pounds, which is pretty big for a parsnip, I guess.
Seems like it.
You wouldn't think the dirt would be deep enough to put one of them down there. So and this guy said he seen it was signed Jim Cannon's parsnip underneath, and Ned had put that on there. So I said, okay, here's the story. Jim Cannon grew this great big old parsnip and everything, and he got to bragging about it and everything. So he commissioned Ned to paint a picture of. Now this would be a portrait of a parsnip. This is not a painting; it's a portrait.
Jim, pretty proud of that parsnip.
Oh yes, he was. And I don't think anybody was around when the official weigh-in came, but it could have been stretched knowing Uncle Jim a little bit anyhow. But anyhow, I have the parsnip in my store now.
The picture of the parsnip.
Yeah. Not the
commissioned.
The
work of art.
Yeah. But I'm thinking, I knew my Uncle Jim, and I knew that he might have commissioned this painting, but I doubt if there was any money involved, knowing my Uncle Jim. So Ned probably did not get paid for it. That's what I'm thinking.
Oh. Well, he might have some sort of trade, maybe.
Yeah, it could have been. Yeah, it could have been a trade-off. Maybe he got a smaller parsnip.
It's hard saying. Well, Uncle Jim was a butcher, wasn't he?
Yeah,
maybe,
among other things, card shark, whatever.
Yeah.
Uncle Jim was actually, Uncle Jim worked up at Spoo's Mill, and what he did, they would they had a chute there where the lumber all came out, and they had tailings they'd cut off, and they could be random lengths. But they made pretty good firewood, so they had an old dump truck. Bill Spoo said he still had the dump truck when he sold the ranch. But Jim would drive this dump truck downtown, and they'd sell these tailings to people around town for wood. And he had, let's see, but the one thing about it, both churches never had to pay for the wood. Spoo's donated the wood as part of their donation to the church. So,
well, that's pretty handy.
Yeah, I'm hoping if we can get old Bill Spoo in here, we can talk a little more about that one of these days.
Well, I think we're gonna have to start having more guests. We've done 8 episodes, and the BS isn't running thin yet, but we should probably get some.
I could run dry.
Oh, I doubt that, but we can inject some new perspectives for sure.
Right. You know, we did a story. I don't know if it was the last one or the one before that about Howard Ross and how he the Limburger under his mustache thing, and I forgot one the other time. Howard Ross was he liked to drink pretty well.
Well, it seems like all these old timers did.
Yeah, but he liked to drink to excess more than some of the other old timers.
Okay.
So he drank up all the libations around Mitchell and everything. So he thought he'd go to the county seat of Fossil and maybe help them out with their drinks. So he traveled over to Fossil. Well, the first thing Mr. Ross did was he got pretty juiced up, and he just walked out in the street and relieved himself.
Right in the middle of the street.
Right in the middle of the street. Man, they had a city marshal there, man. He was on him like crazy.
Probably before he was finished.
Well, yeah, I'm sure Howard finished. But anyhow, he had to go up in front of the Justice of Peace. And so the Justice of Peace asked him, said, you're charged with lewd and fastidious behavior, Mr. Ross. He said, how you going to plead? He said, oh, I'm guilty, Lord, or Judge. I'm guilty. And then he said, Mr. Ross, I'm going to have to fine you $25. Well, Mr. Ross said, okay. So he handed him a $50 bill and turned around and walked out. Before he got to the door, the judge said, Mr. Ross, this is $50. You only owe me $25. He said, you keep it, Judge. I might have to piss and Fossil before I leave here.
I bet he probably made use of that other $25.
Yeah, so he had one coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know if they make characters and people like that around here nowadays. I don't hear much about it anymore, but I guess maybe they do.
I imagine in certain circles, but there's not as many people here as there once were.
Yeah, I don't. And I think with this lifestyle that everybody's living now, I don't think they have enough time to become characters. They're all worried about living and getting some money and doing this and doing that and everything, and they've gone a different way.
Well, there was how many? I mean, there's probably close to 400 people in Mitchell itself back in the day.
Well, yeah, the population of Wheeler County was probably greater, and I think it peaked about 1951, 56 probably.
And so, I mean, it would be easier in the area to make a living and more people to enjoy it with. I think it'd promote more of a character situation.
Yeah, well, and if you just laid around, drank all the time, you had a chance, more time to be a character.
Yeah, I think so.
and at that time, back in the 20s or late 20s, early 30s, they were the Prohibition was coming in, and there was probably more spirits around here then than there is now that you can buy them over the counter.
Yeah, there was like probably a still up every canyon just across the hill from every mill.
Any place there was good water, there was usually a pretty good still. And even today, we're finding evidence that there was a still there at one time, an old barrel or stays or.
Yeah.
We found one at the Simpson place about 20-some years ago. We didn't know it was there. And it was a dugout, and it was back in the hill, and
there it was.
There it was, yeah.
Well, that place is notorious for outlaw activity anyways, with a lot of cattle rustling and sheep rustling,
mostly sheep. Even to this day, we can go through there and back in the, after the timber all burned out, you go through there and find places where there was little pens made out of barbed wire, and people would drive their sheep there to the allotments, and of course they'd take their time grazing through, but they would probably pay a little rent for the grazing they did on the private sector, because they would steal a nice ewe and lamb, maybe 3 or 4,
just
5.
Clean enough, and they wouldn't notice with a band of 1,000.
Yeah. So you find all these little makeshift pens back in the timber there where they
hide them.
Yeah, cattle a little bit bigger and hard to hide, so they didn't do that too much. But
well, and there wasn't as much cattle back then here anyway.
No, but I remember back in the 50s that my grandmother had a place out on West Branch, and Lossie Howard, he bought the place down below it, and he would drive his cattle up, and he would steal some of the pasture now and then, and I'm sure that he paid a little tariff going through there.
Isn't that what they call the long pasture?
Yeah, the long pasture alongside the road, yeah.
Yeah.
That brings us to another thing, the long pasture. We did this yesterday up at our place. We every year every spring we have to go in and repair the fence, the snow and the elk and whatever else, kind of tear it down over the period of time. But that's what we were doing yesterday, and I learned the fencing history of the Simpson place, and also the coal ranch, which is now owned by Papay.
Which is, they call it the White Butte Ranch.
Yeah, right.
Used to be Cole Brothers.
Yeah, and anyhow, I wrote this one for my father-in-law. Lyle Cole spent 64 years on the same ranch. He knew it inside out. Lyle took me under her wing and tried to teach me about what fencing was all about. Dummy me, I didn't know it was an art, and it told the whole ranch's history. The more Lyle taught, the more I learned, the more fencing became a mystery. You don't cut those splices out, just splice into that one that broke. I'll tell you why. Look closely at those splices. They tell the past weather story. In the winter of '54, it said the snow was 5 feet that fell from the sky. That Japanese wire we used back in '69 was soft and stretched. In '70, that German wire was brittle and broke. And wherever we got that wire in '72, it was an unhumorous joke. Never put a steel post in unless you tie it to a wooden one. And if you do, that steel post will sink as deep as the snow gets. Do you hear me, son? Don't pack too many staples. Scrounge around the post for them. We don't have money to burn. Lyle would then say, a staple found is a staple saved is a staple earned. The bottom wire on that 4-wire fence is there to use on the other top 3. They will turn a cow. The way you don't have to pick up the extra wire, just move the wire up. It'll be good enough for now. Well, when God called Lyle on April 7th, 2001, he was ready. But there was another lesson I am sensing. Heaven had some real problems. And you see, God was way over budget on his fencing.
Yeah, I remember that. He's like, no, don't worry about it. Just don't use one of those staples out of your bag there. Just look around the post.
Now, there's a bunch there. You straighten them up a little bit, and of course, it'd probably take you another 20 minutes probably to straighten it after you found them and everything. And but yeah. Boy, I tell you, and those kids that grew up in the Depression said, hey, you got to use everything.
Well, he taught me a pretty good lesson about that. I used to go up and work with him quite a bit, throughout my whole life. And we were in the shop making something one day, and he used to like to make these cutouts. We'd cut up old wash machines, and he'd make, rooster cutouts or any sort of animal or whatever. And I was like, well, I need to go down the station and get more welding rod. We were doing some gas welding. He's like, no, you just go out there and look around for some wire. We don't When I was a kid, we couldn't go to the station every time we needed something.
That's right. Yeah,
So he taught me how to weld with old rusty wire.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It
Gas
works.
welding.
Yeah, yeah. They knew how to save, and then, back in the day, you couldn't drive to Prineville in an hour. It took 2 or 3 days.
Well, and also, it kind of helps with how to think now going through this COVID virus. A lot of those depression era thoughts come back.
Oh yeah.
And the way to, survive when you don't have an abundance.
That's right. You learn how to cope with the situation you're dealt.
Exactly. You okay over there?
Yeah.
You don't have the COVID, do you?
My age, who knows? No, at my age, if I had the COVID, I'd probably be dead.
Yeah, you would have died 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Man.
Knock on wood that it's not over yet.
Yeah. I used to be kind of reluctant to tell everybody my age, but boy, now I'm not, because in June I will turn 77.
77, closer to heaven.
That's right. Yeah. Well, there's a poem. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to do another poem here that I wrote back in 2000. It's about fencing also, but it deals with how cowboys feel about fencing.
Well, they don't typically like to get off their horse.
It tells that right here. A cowboy's courage has never been questioned or needed to put to a test. He will tackle the rankest bull and face down a grizzly bear with zeal and zest. Cowboys' only sign of fear and what makes them whine and wince, the one thing that humbles and scares them is a 5-letter word called fence. It's hard to fix fence from the back of a horse, especially that bottom wire. And there's never been a cowboy when it come to fence that was a real ball of fire. It's a bonus if the cowboy has a wife. She can help pack the gear and take some of the burden now of that cowboy's fencing life. She packs the staples, the stretcher, the hammer, the pliers, the small chainsaw, and extra wire for the splice. They leave right after she cooks breakfast and gets the kids off to school. She opens and closes 4 gates as he sets in the pickup yawning. She daydreams as he pulls through the gate, then honks just as the brainwave was dawning. She's thinking she should have married old what's-his-name, but what the hell, he moved to the city to play the yuppie game. By the time they get to the fence, he's tuckered out, carrying his pliers and gloves. The wife knows the cowboy is dragging his feet because, compared to fencing, she is his first love. They start by propping up the props and resplicing the splices and tying off to anything standing. Then he says he might just contact the fencing out next year. It's just getting too demanding. They have to be home in time to beat the school bus. In spite of the day, she feels she's married a winner. And that all changes in a flash as he yells, "What's for dinner?"
Well, that's kind of a odd Mother's Day poem, but a true story about fencing for sure.
Mothers deal with it every day.
That's right.
Yeah. I tell we were up to the Simpson place, and it's been dear to me. Even somebody said that's why I married Mary, because I got my hooks in the Simpson place and not her.
Well, it is a special place.
Yeah. I wrote this back in 2000 also. It's called Our Place. And a lot of people out there, I feel sorry for them because they don't have a place like this. And with this COVID thing that's going on, it's pretty nice to go up there and knowing, hey, man, you're not probably going to see anybody else.
Out of all the blessings we have, I think that's one of the biggest.
Yeah. And my cousins, they're up there sometimes, but they're pretty good at ducking. So am I. So we never see each other. This is called Our Place. The sun slips slowly in the sky, carving long shadows across the meadow green. A young female deer grazes along in the edge, unaware that she has been seen. To my right, White Butte stands majestically, her southwest side exposed to the sun. Black Butte to my left, looking blacker as the sun plays light game on her flank, just for fun. This year's headed out grasses swings and sways to the tune of the evening breeze. The mountain meadows appear like watery ways of long-lost seas. To my south lies Pisgah's north rim, traversed by crimson and black hues. Its splendor is awesome, and I thank God for its use. This is the place trouble and woes vaporize and vanish. One's thoughts can clear and lighten. I cherish my days here. It unburdens my load, and my outlook brightens. My being is insignificant compared to those wonders. I am minute in God's creation, and often one wonders.
Seems like a pretty awesome place to end, Dad. It's a very awesome poem.
Yeah, I really love that place.
Well, happy birthday to all the mothers.
Happy Mother's Day and happy birthday.
Well, happy birthday, Mother's Day.
Yeah.
Happy day.
Hey, happy day. We got through another one.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks a lot, folks, if you're listening in. And
may the good Lord take a liking to you.
That's right.